to give you a little bit of background on the research that we're doing focusing on growth and climate, a lot of that research depends on looking at tree rings. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and some current work we're doing expanding these chronologies. This work is done under Redwoods and Climate Change Initiative. Yes. How's that? Is that better? So, so this work is funded by Save the Redwoods League, and it's done at Humboldt State University in Steve Silla's lab, who is a collaborator along with Ethan Coonan and Ben Iberly. Can everyone hear me in the back? All right, cool. Yeah, so the language of this talk is in dendrochronology. So this is the dating and study of annual rings in trees. So this is more than simply counting back from bark and getting an age estimate. This is accurately placing a year on each of these rings and knowing that that's correct. So the way we do this is by looking at the pattern of ring width variation. So you can see there's bigger rings, smaller rings, rings with thicker latewood, and these are, this is so because of the overarching climatic pattern. So this leaves essentially a fingerprint or a barcode which we could use to put annual resolution dates on our samples. The process we use is called cross-dating. So here we see the relative pattern of ring widths across a population of trees. And with enough replication, we can put dates onto our tree core samples. And why do we want to do this? There's so many applications of dendrochronology. So what we're focusing on currently is a lot of growth and climate aspects. But I'll just show you a few other applications. A really important one is fire histories, especially for Coast Redwood. A lot of the work on Coast Redwood is based on simply counting between fire scars, so that's just a minimum frequency. If we can date this piece of wood, we can put year dates on those fire scars and have improved resolution of fire return intervals. We can date death, disease, we can date encroachment, we can date archaeological artifacts. We can also reconstruct climate. Looks like this is washed out. Imagine there's a chronology going back. So if we have a record of, say, stream flow or temperature, and then we take our tree ring record, and the tree ring widths are tightly correlated with that record, we could then use the tree rings to reconstruct that climate variable back in time. So what about Coast Redwood? That's what we're here to talk about. Dendrochronology in Coast Redwood has gone back quite a while. As Emily referred to earlier, dendrochronology is not something new. It's been around for a good century. In the 1920s, work on Coast Redwood and dendro was pretty much that it's difficult to do. We can see this wedging right here, discontinuous rings. So the rings sort of wedge and don't follow all the way around the stem at certain places. That's a common occurrence, as well as these really tight rings. There had been a little bit of advances in redwood dendrochronology. In the 90s, Peter Brown and Tom Swetnam looked at some down trees, and they did create a 250-year cross-dated chronology. But that had pretty much been it for cross-dating in Coast Redwood until the work that we have done, and I'll show you about now. One of the main limitations, as you can see, if we're limited to the ground, we can only access down material or the base of a tree. So the way we were able to figure out this puzzle was by our sampling methodology, was one way. So we cored standing live trees, so you can see, Steve Sillett here and his canopy biology research endeavor has really made a big difference for what we know about redwoods, and it's helped us here be able to cross-date and figure out redwood dendrochronology. So we take cores every 10 meters up the tree. So we take replicate cores at multiple heights. Okay, we're above the basal buttressing, so we're above the anomaly at the bottom. And so we have high tree within tree replication. So where we have about 10 cores per tree, others might have 10 trees per plot. So we're spending a lot of our effort on each individual tree. It's because they're so massive and complex. That's what we need to do in order to move forward and cross-date. So here's an example. If we had multiple cores on this tree, we can see that we can catch missing or locally absent rings by the process of cross-dating. Takes a lot of time to do this, but it works. So this is an overview of the research plots, long-term research and monitoring plots under Save the Redwoods League's Redwoods and Climate Change Initiative. There are many aspects of this research. Bob Van Pelt's going to speak later, and I encourage you to visit their website. You can learn about and link to a lot of the different research. So we're going to focus on Coast Redwood, and we have plots from Jedediah Smith in the north down to Landell's Hill along the Big Sur coast. So we have Jed Smith, Prairie Creek, Redwood National Park, Humboldt Redwoods, Montgomery Woods, Samuel P. Taylor, Big Basin in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and down here. So we span the latitudinal gradient is the point here. So for all these plots, my first job is to cross-date and generate those tree ring chronologies. From there, we can use that for many other applications. So we're successful in doing so. Here's a publication, Carroll et al. 2014. So we're able to generate millennium scale cross-dating and interannual climate sensitivities. So a lot of this blue is washed out, but what I wanted to show you here, without getting into it too much, from Jed Smith down to Landell's Hill, we have cross-dated chronologies for all these plots, whereas before, we just went back 250 years at one location. So now we have this network of tree ring chronologies, which can be used essentially as a ruler and a tool to further our research and knowledge about Coast Redwood. Replication drops as we go back in time, so we want to extend these chronologies, add replication, and add locations. We're not done. This is just the foundation of this work. This is a tree ring index. Emily earlier spoke about some of the long-term trends. I've removed long-term trends here because I just want to create a ruler of year-to-year variation. Long-term trends would be a different topic. Interannual climate sensitivities. We also were able to show that for different climate variables from the north to south, how they relate to the ring widths, how they correlate. So we have really strong soil moisture sensitivity in the south, on par with blue oak and some of our most sensitive tree ring indices. I'm going to skip over that because it's washed out. This is Sillett et al. 2015. I encourage you to read it. It has a lot of really great information. A couple things that the dendrochronology allowed us to do here. We were able to age standing redwoods. So by taking those replicate cores up and down the tree, we can use rates of wood radius change to calculate age. We calculate an age of 2,510 years for one tree at Redwood National Park. Wood volume growth, so we could take those increments and take it over the whole volume of the tree. And we can also look at those long-term trends, which are really interesting as well. The point of the work that I'm going to present in this short amount of time now is extending these chronologies using a variety of sampling methods. So here's our plots. We're going to add Arcata Community Forest and Muir Woods National Monument. I want to use a variety of methods. So what I'm going to talk about here is what other ways can we grab these tree ring chronologies and what's the weaknesses and strengths of those. Because coring standing live trees is quite technical. So it's time and labor. There's a lot of time and labor involved. So what about coring down trees? One negative there is the increment borer is very likely to jam. And so a lot of times you're just battling with the increment borer. Cross sections from down trees. This is more of an opportunistic way to sample. Sometimes we have trees that fall over a trail or a road. So we can grab a sample, add it to our chronologies, and see what other kind of information we can use there. And also wedges from stumps. All right, so Muir Woods National Monument, we had 3 trees. It's a very low number, but since it takes so much time to work up these tree ring chronologies, every sample is valuable. 1 standing live tree, 2 down trees. The standing live tree is 76 meters. It was sampled during the BioBlitz in 2014. So there's a lot more information on BioBlitz in this tree. These are the cores collected from this tree. So this is our standard methodology. We'll grab about, we have 17 here. You see 40 meters, 50 meters, 60 meters, 70 meters. You can see some of these marker years. So that's 1983. It's a wide ring associated with El Nino. And here it is in the different cores. 77 is a drought year. You can see it in the different cores. So that's cross-dating, visual cross-dating there. We also use software to generate correlations to check our work. And we have a lot of missing rings here, but in the end I was able to place all the rings. So this was a great foundation to start at Muir Woods, going back to 1448. And we had a couple cross-sections. This vortex tree fell. Actually, I think some folks heard this tree fall, and oh, that's the next one. That's the solstice. But anyway, this one fell as well. So I had one series here. It's about, I don't know, maybe about 4 feet wide. And from pith to bark, with just one series, I was able to capture every ring perfectly with a good sensitivity to climate. So this is like your dream series. One line and you're done. So we have the oldest dated piece of redwood south of Mendocino County in this sample. And the solstice trees, this is a little bit more common of an example for coast redwood cross-dating. We had one cross-section and 11 cores from a fallen tree, and we had only about 56% of the rings were annually resolved. So very difficult. There's sections where it's just very tight, difficult to decipher the rings. So we can't just grab any piece of redwood and say, use this. It's sort of a, you open it up and see what you get once you sand down the wood. Sometimes it's a mess, sometimes it's perfect. So this is our tree ring index standardized around 1. And this is the solstice, so you can see the black line is the number of samples I was able to date compared to the top of the red line, which is our total number of samples. So there's a big gap there. Some areas I couldn't even make it through. So we have to piece together these complex series and hope we get some really clean ones as well to generate these baseline chronologies. At the Arcata Community Forest, we had 9 trees. 6 were standing live second growth trees. The community forest was logged in about the 1880s, and this is an image looking out of one of Ben Iberly's plots, and Ben's going to speak next. And we also looked at 3 stumps. So the stumps are interesting because there's no material in this forest standing live that we can use to compare. So we don't have the bark to anchor us in when we work back. So we're going to take samples from these stumps and compare them to our chronologies in the north. For the second growth cross-dating, codominant was a lot easier than subordinate. That makes sense. But let's talk about the stumps. That's the interesting part. So to get these samples, we had plunge cuts into the stumps, and this is Darius DeMonte from the city of Arcata, who took these samples for us. He did a great job, and we had access thanks to Mark Andre in the city of Arcata as well. So we took these plunge cuts out. Okay, so we don't have anything to compare it to in the Arcata Community Forest. So the process here goes, we'll take each stump and compare those tree rings with each other and create a floating chronology, and then we'll lock that in with our northern chronology. So we were able to cross-date these stumps using reference chronologies over 35 kilometers away. So this was a very good success. We went back to the year 1273. You can see here's the chronology. This is from the stumps. This is where the sapwood and bark had deteriorated. We don't have any dates here. And then we return with the second growth. Here's our Muir Woods chronology. So these are chronology lengths. You can see our chronologies go all the way back to 328 at Redwood National Park. And we've added these 2. And this adds to our tree ring archive. We're treating these samples as highly valuable for current and future research. So we have quite a number of trees, series, and rings that we're going to be looking at for quite a while. And we have continued opportunities. This is a tree that fell in Samuel P. Taylor plot. It has fire scars, so we're going to be able to accurately date those fires in our plot. And also new locations. This is really important aspect as well. You can see these redwoods growing out of a canyon in Napa County. This is one of the easternmost groves. And sites like this are going to be really important as we're looking to look at growth and climate on more edge locations. So with that, I'll wrap it up and see if we have time for questions or not. Thanks. Okay. Any questions? Yes?
I want to know if you've worked with Steve Norman at all. I know he's done a lot of that stuff.
Yes, Steve Norman, I had met him a while ago and have read his work and spoken with him quite a bit. Is he in North Carolina though now?
Yes.
Yeah, so Steve did some great work, so definitely.
I still have stumps and storage.
Yeah, there's definitely lots of talk of stumps and pieces of wood in storage in many places. Yes?
What are you doing to preserve the forests that you have?
Well, the process is really simple. We just glue them down with Elmer's glue and sand with some simple sandpaper. We're keeping them in fireproof cabinets at Steve Sillett's lab at HSU, so we have a really good working inventory where it's linked to our data and coded. But in terms of preservation, it's just checking on them. Yeah, keeping them in a place where they're secured and sealed off.
Does the digital data go into the public domain?
Well, we have with that, the tree ring paper that I published was at open access, so the chronologies are out there for dating. The tree ring data is under Save the Redwoods, and we have it as well. It's really complex with the way we code each one, so we don't just have it out there at this point. Since we're currently actively working, we just have people contact us, and we go from there. You know?
The RNP chronology goes back, way back.
That's right.
The others don't. And
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, for example, at Gadsden, Bird Creek, or Humboldt Redwoods, what's the limit if you want to go back as far as?
Yeah, well, all those chronologies were from standing live trees. So there's one tree at RNP where we had, in a short section, about 200 plus missing rings. So because of that slow growth on that tree, we're able to get back further with our 32-inch increment borer.
So you're not able to find similar trees yet?
Not yet. But then using these stumps and downwood, that's going to let us overlap and extend back in time older than we can reach with any increment borer.
Is there another increment borer make that can work?
I don't know why, but 32 is the peak out for that.
So theoretically, if you're in one forest, you have a perfect core. That's all you need, right? Is an unfit chronology of that core, all that you're in a particular area.
Yes, theoretically, and normally people will only take 1 to 2 per tree for dendrochronology work, but because of the complexities here, we took more. And in addition, the way that we sampled allowed for other research questions to be answered. And so the sampling methodology was multifold.
So once you sort of get your chronology in one specific area, you don't need to sample it.
Well, that's what we're saying is we're based on a low number, so it's not just done. We have areas where it's really weak, so we have sections where, say, there's 50 years where we don't have many series going through, so there's certain areas where we want to pinpoint. But, yeah, in theory, when you get to a good point, you know, you have a solid chronology, but we're still building upon that, and that's one of the points, is that we're not just done.
One more question. I was you mentioned that you said your chronology goes back to 328.
Yes.
What's the source of that early record?
That was from a tree core taken from a standing tree.
And you recall the location?
Redwood National Park. Okay.
All right, let's give it all to them.